Hey, trust, it's not given, it's earned. And delegation is not just a task, it's leadership superpower.
Raw, uncut, and unapologetic. Welcome to Men Talking Mindfulness.
All right, so Will and I are here today to talk about trust, and I feel truly that trust it's the base of everything, right? And I mean, whether it's your relationship at home with your kids or at work, it's really the basis of all that. But we're going to be talking today about that. We're going to be talking about what happens when trust is broken, and we're going to chat about what trust really means, how to build that up, and then what to do when it gets wrecked, right? And then we're going to dive into the next piece of trust, and that's delegation, which is more than just passing off stuff. It's about helping people to step up. I do a lot of executive coaching, and when I talk about delegation, I talk about, hey, look, when you leave for a day or take a day off or you get sick or you take a vacation, you're actually not passing the buck to your people. You're actually giving them an opportunity to step up. And that's what we're going to talk about today, which it's an opportunity to help your people step up. And then you got to start by trusting yourself first. That's a huge piece. And we'll talk about that. So let's discuss. But before that, Will, how you doing, brother?
I'm good. I'm excited for this episode. I mean, trust is like the foundation of everything.
Yeah.
I mean, so I'm really excited to dive in and, talk about what you mentioned, because it's, I don't know, it's just a bedrock of so much of what we do. So hey, just a couple things. Hey, Men Talking Mindfulness, if you want to check out what we're doing. Men Talking Mindfulness, if you want to sponsor our show. Go to Men Talking Mindfulness if you want to join our next team of meditators. That's going to start on October 6th. We have a 9-week program that's starting. If you want to be part of that, head to mentalkingmindfulness.com/learn meditation, or just get to the website, or to get to the website, text MTM to 33777. One breath grounding practice, John, to help us get on the inside. And this is a great tool for trust as well. Just to start and develop a way in is with the breathing. So exhale out, nice and easy. Let go, drop down, 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 deep with that breath. And let's take a big giant inhale, fill all the way up. A little bit more, top it off. Hold the breath nice and easy. 3, 2, 1, exhale out. Let it go, let it go, let it go. So nice. Great. And then come back, you can make some movement if you like. Good to have another show here, John. And it's great to have everyone that's out there that's listening. And hey, help us grow the show, share the podcast. Thanks for tuning in. We really love doing the show and seeing our audience grow as well. So let's jump into trust, John. And let's start. Where do you want to begin?
Go for it. Well, I think the really good spot to start is what I mentioned there at the beginning, right? That's self-trust. So you want to start there, man?
Yeah, well, I mean, self-trust. And we're going to mention some key aspects. And we're going to read a little bit with this because I really want to hit these marks because they're really important.
Yeah.
But what is self-trust? Is really that ability to have faith in yourself. Accepting, I think it's important to kind of know your strengths and your weaknesses and, know thyself. This is part of it. Feeling confident about your decisions. And believing in your capacity, and this comes with experience, to handle challenges and being secure in your choices. But what we discovered here in our research is there's really 5 key aspects to developing self-trust. And the first one here is acknowledging your strengths and weaknesses. So this is we can't be great at everything, and it's not like you need to be great at everything. But if you know your strengths, then I'd imagine those are the things that I continually work towards. But I also use my weaknesses as a way to develop and use the challenge of my weakness as a way to develop more trust by actually trying to go out and work on those weaknesses. That's I think challenge here. What I've learned, John, by a lot of different things I've done, really helps me to develop more self-confidence, which is another aspect of trusting yourself by doing the hard things, putting yourself in those situations that can be really challenging and trying to find your way through it, or develop the technique, or just keep showing up and, for yourself. And by showing up for yourself again and again and again, that is definitely a big way of getting to know yourself, but also getting to develop that trust and getting to develop more of the self-confidence that comes with the trust in yourself. So
yeah, I love that. And, with that, I think a next key attribute to that is practicing self-compassion. And when you hear that self-compassion, a lot of people are like, what is that? Self-kindness, self-compassion. They kind of feel that's soft. But one of the pieces that I like to think about, and hey, if you're watching this and you're wondering what this is behind my head, it's my chair. I'm sitting down for this episode. I'm not feeling great, so bear with me as I sit in my chair.
John got a neck brace.
It looks like I got huge traps.
Right? Yeah, you got giant traps. Anyway,
I wish not this big though. Anyhow, so the self-compassion piece, that's what I teach on regularly. And one of the things that I kind of imagine is that we have self-compassion that's down here. And if you're listening to this, I'm holding up my hand at one level, and we have compassion for others that's kind of up here. And I don't believe that there's ever a way to bridge that gap between self-compassion and compassion for others. But what I do feel is that there's a way to raise compassion for yourself. And as you raise compassion for yourself, you're going to raise compassion for others. Now, that said, I think that self-trust comes with not talking negatively to yourself or about yourself to yourself.
Right.
Especially like after making mistakes, right? It's very easy for us to be like, I'm such an idiot. I knew something like that was going to happen. These kinds of things. And we've talked about that on the show before. But in developing that self-compassion and developing that internal kind of self-supportive internal environment, that self-compassion, I believe, builds a foundation upon which you can build that self-trust. So I think that's a key attribute for sure. Turn it back over to you.
Well, I think you have to I think with self compassion and self kindness, it's important. Like that's the relationship with yourself, and we have this negativity bias. We have this default mode network that's always on.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, that narrative, right, is always kind of running in the background. And that negativity bias, most of the time, our thoughts are going to become negative. So when we do something and we fuck something up and things aren't going our way, we can get really, really hard on ourselves. But self-compassion and self-kindness are a skill like anything else. And it takes some practice to develop it so you can actually begin to develop a relationship to yourself when you're not things aren't going your way, or you fall short of a particular goal, or you fail at something. It's like you don't have to beat yourself up. I mean, and that's not going to help you or serve you in any way. Right. But self-compassion is going to help you, right, to just it's going to help you to just develop more of that supportive relationship to yourself. And one key, and we learned this in my compassion course, we learned this and heard this from Kristen Neff, Dr. Kristen Neff, who was on the show, is talking to yourself and supporting yourself in a way a great friend would, or a mentor, or a great coach or a teacher. What would they do? So instead of lambasting yourself, how can you just be more kind and more compassionate to yourself, because you're always going to screw things up. That's always. Just part of being a human being.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Another part here is really key is setting boundaries and keeping promises. If you say you're going to do something, right? Yeah, go for it, John.
No, I was just gonna say, I struggle with keeping promises to myself quite often. So
I've seen it a few times.
Oh, I know you have.
Oh, I'm not saying
as I've got a bag of Doritos over here.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say it's fucking food. Is a little bit of your weakness sometimes.
Oh, for sure, it is, absolutely. So go ahead, man. You were talking about setting boundaries.
No, so boundaries, it's right. I mean, it's just if you keep showing up for yourself and keep showing up in the way that you want to show up, whether it's if you schedule yourself to do something at this particular time and you show up and you do that, how are you going to feel? Right? I'm going to feel stronger about myself. I'm going to feel a sense of accomplishment. And then then I have that energy and that history in which I can be like, oh, I can do that too. I can do the next thing, and you really develop, instead of, always playing that negotiation game of oh, should I I could do this instead, versus like, you know what, I said I'm going to do this and I'm going to move forward. The likelihood of you doing that alternative thing, right, that your mind wants you to do instead of like your will or your passion wants you to do, decrease considerably when you keep showing up. And one way that I really experienced this deeply when I did my second Vipassana, which is like 10 days, 10 days of 10 hours of meditation a day. Every meditation you're sitting for an hour. And it got grueling like day 5, 6, 7, like 8. My body was just aching like crazy.
I bet.
And I remember I had this moment where like they're not watching you, like a prison guard, at this place, like, to make sure you're doing what you're supposed to be there to do. They let probably about 3/4 of the meditation you do on your own time, whether it's in your room or whether it's in a meditation hall or whether it's this place called a pagoda. I mean, we're adults, like, so I could have just slept the whole day and only did like 3 of the meditations that are required, as a group. But I kept showing up. And I remember when I was really like, just fucking pressed, just don't do this right now because I'm so sore. And I showed up and I did it. I sat for another hour in all this pain. And I came out with this wonderful insight of just like, of how incredibly important it is, how it develops that trust, how it develops, a deep sense of self-respect for showing up for yourself when you say you're going to do it. And setting boundaries is important too. If you have stated or claimed that you're not going to eat another bag of Doritos, or you're going to change your habits in some ways. It's like, it's not going to be easy from the get-go, but just starting small chunks and just keep going and keep going. That's how you really begin to develop more of that trust to yourself. And then you can take that trust and then bring it out into the world and to other people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that setting boundaries even goes a little bit further, right? Like, one thing that I think we're all guilty of is overcommitting, right? Yes. And if you set those boundaries, there's one thing setting boundaries, but then actually respecting those boundaries. And that can be boundaries in your work. Maybe you work 9 to 5 and you don't answer emails after 5 o'clock, or you don't answer work texts after 5 o'clock, unless of course it's emergency or something. But setting and respect, or rather setting and then actually practicing those boundaries, I think that's where the trust really comes in. And then the next piece is it's funny because I just talked about the inner voice that can be so negative. But then there's the other side to your inner voice that can be supportive, right? Like, hey, I can do this. I've got my own compass, my own inner compass, kind of guides your values and what it is you believe in. And I think when you listen to that inner voice, it gives you the courage to act on that, right? Thinking, hey, I want to be, okay, so we had Erin Deal on a few weeks ago, right? And we talked about improv. Maybe she wants to be that improv person, and then having the courage to actually get up there on stage. Excuse me, as I coughed directly into the microphone. I know. Yeah. Hey, we're being real here. We're being real. Sorry about that. I'm sure I blew out everybody else's ears too.
Okay.
So anyway, having the courage to act on that internal voice. So again, it sounds like I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth, but you have to know the difference between that negative internal voice, that negative narrative, the negative story that we tell ourselves, and then the other side of that same voice. It's kind of like the angel on your shoulder and the devil on the other shoulder. Hey, you have to trust the good side, and I think that's going to really help you to trust in yourself. And then I'll turn it over to you for the last one, brother.
Yeah. I mean, that inner voice is really key. And one way that I have, and I'm sure you have, developed more of that inner voice is by meditating. Getting
for sure.
Quiet, right? Quieting down the mind, quieting down that default mode network, getting into a place of peace, turning off the stress and cortisol hormones, right? And what comes online is that self. We have later this season, we have Seth Copeland coming on. We're going to talk about the self, but that self has its own incredible brilliance on the inside. And when we calm down and we sit, we meditate, we do self-reflective exercises, we begin to exercise and feel more of that intuition, understand and really attune, to that inner voice. That can be very quiet at times, very, very fucking quiet, but it's there. Like I've seen it, John, when, I'm going to make a decision and it's a pretty big decision, and it's a financial decision. And like, I'm always on the lookout now because I've fucked up on Bitcoin and I've done other things that have not been so, and I should have listened to those voices, John. They were there, but I didn't listen. And
you should have listened to everybody else's voice too.
Yeah. I'm
just kidding, man. I'm kidding.
I know. But it's helpful. It's and it's going to help you develop. It's going to give you more of this inner voice, the courage to act on that intuition, which is really important. And then, John, I got to say, the last one here, it's like, and as I read this one, it's just like I probably have failed more in my life than I've succeeded.
Of course,
but
we all have.
What you can do, it's so bad, right? And it's like, embracing failure as an opportunity to learn. And when you start seeing the world and bringing yourself into the world in that way and just seeing the world as a classroom, it's just like it's all an experience. And every experience that comes my way, I can use as a learning experience, whether it's good or bad, whatever the results will be. And that's another way to just develop more of that trust, develop more of my self-confidence. So the next circumstance that comes, and I have developed all this, this self-trust, maybe I can really, get a little sharper with that next choice and like maybe make that better decision instead of like, taking a couple steps back or whatever. But, it really starts on the inside. And again, meditation, also getting in your body, John, is a great way to develop self-trust. Like if you're a couch potato and, you're not really utilizing your body. I hate to come back to the body, but it's just like, your body's working against you in that way. So when you really want to get up and do something with your body, and then your body hasn't worked out or hasn't really done any physical exercise, and it could be a really long time for some people, it's like you're letting yourself down, and now you're losing that trust to yourself and to your body. And it's like, so there's so many ways you can develop that trust. Meditation, working out, self-reflective journal exercise, I think is great. Writing has helped me to really develop more of a self-trust because that helps me kind of get on the inside with that intuition as well. So many ways to develop it, but it's worth it because if I can trust myself, then I'm just going to be more of an agent of my own change and more of an agent for other people's change in the world, if that's what I want to do. And therefore I can also experience trust in other people a little bit more effectively. And that's what we're going to go into next.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, that self-trust and how that ties directly into delegation, right? A lot of people are like, well, what does delegation have to do with self-trust? Because delegation has to do with trust in the people that you delegate to. Well, you have to be able to trust your own judgment, right? When you're going to delegate, if you don't trust it, like if you think that somebody is a slip knot and you're not going to be able to delegate to them, but then you delegate to them anyway, there's probably that coming back to that inner voice, right? We just talked about that inner voice is telling you that person is a slip knot for some reason, but then you delegate to them anyway. It could backfire on you. Now, there definitely are people who surprise you, some people that you think are slip knots and then end up being stellar performers. But I think it helps you to trust your own judgment. And when you do trust your own judgment, I think it's easier to let go and then delegate because you're not second guessing yourself, right?
Right.
And then the flip side, or not the flip side, but let's go further. You've delegated, but you still don't trust yourself and your judgment about that person. Then you can continually check in on them, right? You've delegated to them, but you're like, hey, how's that task going? What are you doing about this? I wouldn't do it that way. I would do it this way. What is that? That's micromanaging, right? Because you're worried about how it's going to, what the outcome is. But if you trust in yourself and you trust that you've made the right decision, then you're going to step back and let them go, let them potentially even fail. Like you talked about, failure is a growing opportunity. Then let them grow, and then you're going to further trust in yourself as you do it over and over and over again. It becomes easier to step back and let them handle it.
Yeah.
So, what happens when you're second guessing yourself? When you don't trust yourself, it becomes hard to trust anyone. And then you end up holding on to everything, right? And I find this a lot in the executive coaching that I do, that people end up with so many things on their plate that they can't do. I'm like, well, of this stuff, what can you delegate? And they're like, well, I love my team, but I don't want to put too much on their plate. And really what they're saying
Right.
when they say, I don't want to put too much on their plate, is I don't trust them and I don't trust myself. And then you end up holding on to everything. And there's no way that you alone, you're going to be able to get everything done right.
No,
So
definitely.
that micromanaging kicks in, but it's also, you end up overloading yourself when you're not trusting yourself.
Right.
So I think that's a pretty good kickoff right there for the show on trust in yourself. You got anything else there, Will?
No, I mean, I think like that self-trust is gonna, as you develop more, for me, as I develop more self-trust, and I really do, there's obviously some things that I'm not absolutely great at, or things that I'm working on, and as far as in that self-trust realm, but I don't see the world as a threat. You know what I mean? Which I think that's where it comes. If I can trust myself and I can bring my best self to the world, and and be kind to myself, then I'm going to be more kind to other people, more compassionate to other people, and the world just starts to work more for me, instead of me expecting the other shoe to drop, or another threat to come around the corner. So it's
Right.
like, and it's also, but I'm also, John, with self trust, you're going to probably, I'd imagine, you're going to be down into the rest and digest, the sympathetic part of your nervous system, or the parasympathetic part of your nervous system, where you are just more relaxed. Like if you're in a heightened emotional state, it's going to be tough to do anything with cortisol in your bloodstream,
Right.
because you're just in a state of anxiety, or in a state of stress, or a state of absolute panic, because of what's going on around you, or you think everything around you is a problem. So, if you're delegating that way, if you're living that way without the self-trust, and you're delegating that way, it's like you're always going to be micromanaging, and you're not going to get the best results from yourself or your team, because you're not letting people, do the work that that you're paying them for.
Right.
So,
Well, let's all great points, man. And I fully agree.
yeah,
I want to move on from the self
yeah,
trust to what is trust with others.
yes,
And I'll kick a question over to you first. When you think about trust,
yeah.
specifically trust in others, what does that mean to you?
Well, great example. Me and you, John. Like I expect you to show up here at 3:00, for a recording of the episode,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
I trust you, and we've developed. I got to say, John, this is one of the best relationships I've ever had.
Oh
Me and
man,
you,
I'm gonna
the
cry over
show.
here.
Like, yeah, no, I'm with
No,
you.
I believe it. Same thing, man. I was talking about you this very morning, how I'm so close to you and how much I trust you. Funny enough.
Yeah.
So,
Right. Well, but how we developed that? Our trust started and began, right. We're like, hey, let's go on this journey together.
yeah.
And then, you're showing up and doing this certain thing. I'm showing up doing another thing. I said I'm going to do, X, and I came through with X. You said you're going to follow up with Y, and you came through with Y. We built to Z together. Just like we're,
Yeah.
I'm like, start trusting people through their actions
Mm-hmm.
most of the time. You know what I mean? Or through their, when they, when you say you're going to do something, do something. When you say you're going to show up in some place, show up to that place. Don't flake out. Right.
Right.
And I don't know why that's such a difficult thing anymore. Like this should be a norm across our society. This is the way that we should always be acting as mature adults in an adult society, or a society run by adults instead of like children.
Right.
And this is like, that's one way. It's like, whatever you're going to say, whatever, stick to your word. Word is your bond, right? That's going to help me trust you.
Mm.
But if you're going to say you're going to do something, and you come through it, dude, that's going to start building more trust.
Right.
And then I feel more secure about you. And, most all this, it's been years now, John, that we've done this podcast. It's like, even if you can't get to something, I know, like, it's not like not taking care of your responsibilities. I know that something else came up, something
Right.
that came up that got in the way of you, fulfilling that obligation or that promise, to the show and myself.
Yeah. And I'll say that, and using our show and our friendship and our professional relationship as that example.
Yeah.
Last week, right? So I do a lot of the post production for the show, and then I publish it, or I schedule it to be published. But last week, for an example, is I did all the post show production, and then I uploaded it, scheduled it to be published, but I didn't put all the notes in. And I said, "Hey, Will, I've got a busy week. I'm not going to have time to go back and put these notes in. Could you put the notes in?" Mm-hmm. And I went back and checked, the following day, and they hadn't been done. Mm-hmm. And there was a part of me that was like, "Hey," I wanted to reach out and be like, "Hey, Will, can you get to the notes?" But then I was like, "John, back off. Will's got it. I trust him. He's going to get it done by the time he needs to get it done." Now, it might not be done on my timeline, but it's done when it needs to get done. Right. And that's a lot of people get wrapped up in their own timelines, and that's where they start to micromanage. If there's a deadline, if things are done by the deadline, that's great. They don't have to have it done by your personal deadline. That's even before the actual deadline. Right. So again, coming back to the anecdote here with our show, the show publishes on Monday, and I wanted to check on you on Friday, but then I'm like, he's got all weekend to do this. He'll get it. He'll get it done.
That's what I was thinking.
Exactly. And you had plenty of time. And the same has obviously been true in reverse a couple of times when you do the snippets, the video snippets, and you probably have a timeline in your head, and I haven't stuck to that timeline because, one, it hasn't been expressed, right? You haven't said, "Hey, can you have this done by X date?" Right. The date that both of us have to do something by is the date that the show gets published. Anyway, now I'm getting on a soapbox, but the bottom line is it kind of goes both ways, right? I don't want to say I delegated something to you, but I trusted you to get something done. Yeah. Then by you doing it on your own timeline, then you kind of trusted me to not micromanage you, right? Yeah. Not that there's a leadership micromanagement relationship between us, but you kind of see what I'm saying. But let's come back from there to like how do you know, right? How do you know when you really trust someone? Because initially, there's as an entrepreneur or as a salesman, you've got to get people, salesperson, you've got to get people to know you first. Then you've got to get them to like you and then trust you. So know, like, trust. Mm-hmm. And how do you know when you move from that know and like to that trust stage? I'd love to talk about that. What are your thoughts on that, man?
Well, I think that, there's two relationships here. I think, like, the personal friend relationship is definitely one thing, and then the work relationship. Sure. Work could be a little bit easier to see if you can trust somebody and establish trust, because you guys should all be working together towards a common goal, right? So when you have a goal, you need to take actions towards that goal. So the people you can trust or not trust, if they're doing their work, if they're showing up like we talked about, if they're taking those actions in order to fill those obligations in order to, as a group, to reach that goal, right? So that could be a little bit easier to kind of gauge and monitor where you are in the trust, or do I trust or do I not trust? Mm-hmm. Whereas in the personal level, you're not necessarily working towards a goal for something. Like we have both, John. We're work and we're friends. Yeah. But like if you're just friends with somebody, like I'm meeting a friend tonight for dinner. I mean, he's great fucking guy. I've known him for at least like 12 years now. My relationship to this guy, I just love him.
Mm.
And what a key here is just being vulnerable, being honest, being authentic, not trying to put up some front or try to be somebody that you're not, or like making it all about you instead of like actually listening to them and listening to what they're doing, and like just listening is an act of compassion and an act of vulnerability, just being there and listening and holding space for them. So that's a big piece here, is like that vulnerable. Yeah, go for it.
I think the one of the things that you've mentioned in the past is one of the biggest pieces about just developing a friendship, or what people look for in a conversation, is that authenticity and vulnerability, and that's where I think that trust comes from. Is when you that trust comes from is when you share something personal,
Yeah.
Or you give them some type of small task. So I would say in a friendship, maybe it's you share something personal, and in a professional relationship, you give them, maybe you start with a small task, but then you work up to an important task. And with that, sharing something personal or giving them an important task, you don't feel anxious about it. You feel that, one, if you share something personal, they're not going to go out and tell somebody else about it. They're going to protect it and hold it as something that you confided in them about. Right. And then if it's the second piece where you've given them something important to do, they're going to go out and do it. And that, to me, is when you start to realize that you really trust someone.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. And also not like, that those words, that vulnerable moment, that story that you shared, that like deep, like, like stories sometimes are just like that deep emotional story that you might be sharing. They're not using it against you down the road. You know what I mean? Like they're not,
for sure.
Like, yeah, I mean, that's like, because that would go into like betrayal, or I would be really frustrated. That'd be very hard to kind of deal with, definitely at this age,
Right.
Okay, well, I think that's pretty good, John.
Yeah. You want to talk about, so, if we've talked about what trust is, we've talked about, how to be vulnerable, how to know that you trust someone. Well, let's talk about how you build that trust. So, I think, we talked about consistency. We've talked about consistency time and time again in the show. And I think that's a big piece of how you build that trust, right? Maybe keeping your word, right? So I just talked about developing trust in somebody else. You give them something. You give them either an important small task to kind of test the waters, or you tell them something personal about yourself to test those waters. But the reverse is true, is if you want to build trust in yourself from somebody else, I think if they express some vulnerability and they share something vulnerable, something personal about them, or give you a small important task kind of to test the waters with you got to keep your word, right? And you got to do what you say you were going to do. Just like that, developing trust in yourself, you got to do what you say you're going to do so that you develop trust in yourself. Yeah, you've got to do what you say you're going to do to develop trust in you from somebody else. Because, hey, I can say all day, hey, Will, I'm going to get this done. I'm going to get this done. I'm going to get this done. But if I don't do it, then of course you're not going to be trusted. You're not going to trust me, because trust is built on not what I say that I'm going to do, but in my actually doing it, right? It's built with actions, not those words. And the more often that I prove, right? If today was week one of our friendship and of our show, and I showed up and I did what I said I was going to do, that would build a little bit of trust, right? But then over 4.5 years working together, and I've proved myself and you've proved yourself, the more that you do that, the more you prove you're reliable, the more people will start to trust you. So I think that consistency is a big piece in how you build it.
For sure. Yeah, exactly. And it's, now it's like, what we developed here with Men Talking Mindfulness based on, we started with that, building that foundation of trust. Now it's just like, we're a machine.
Yeah.
We're in a like a like a relationship together. I don't know. I'm trying to think of what kind of a gear that would look like or something like that. But you know what I mean? We're like connected. Like we're like a married couple in some podcast. But for real, right? I mean, it's just like you got stuff to do, I got stuff to do. We have a deadline that the show needs to get done, and we go out and do it. And the more that we keep, and it was what's interesting, John, is like we also have so much respect for each other because of the trust that we built. If something comes up that I can't do it, I'd be like, just like you did the other day, and you did delegate to me, or just like, hey, Will, I can't do X, Y, and Z right now. Can you get to this, before Monday or whatever? Of course, I know when the show is going to launch, but I got it done. I mean, again, not like exactly when you wanted it, but you were, you had enough trust to be like, hey, like I know I'll get it done, and I think I did it whenever Sunday or some shit.
Yeah, you got it done by when it was needed.
Exactly.
So,
beautiful.
Well, one of the difficult things with trust, and I'm sure you've run into people like this. We both have. Everyone listening to, I'm sure, has run into this. But how do you win over someone's trust who's not ready to trust you, right? There's people out there, right? And I'm sure like I said, we've all experienced it. How would you say that you win someone's trust who may not be ready to trust you?
Time, consistency, and patience.
Oh, wow.
Right. It takes time. It takes time to develop trust. I mean, some people could be deeply traumatized. Some people could have been really screwed over in certain relationships. So they, if you're in a romantic relationship, it could take time to develop that. Can I trust this guy? Can I trust that guy? And it takes time to develop. But like, if you're continually showing up as yourself and authentically, and again, authenticity is something that can't be faked. I mean, that's why it's called authenticity, right? I mean, and there's a certain energy, that comes with authenticity. And if you're bringing yourself, all of yourself to every interaction you have with a particular person, whether it's romantic or not, or whether it's a new friendship in some way, and you keep showing up in that consistent way, plus consistently honoring what you said you're going to do. And that could just be showing up for coffee, or showing up for a hike or something like that. Mm-hmm. Then you're going to be like, oh, and that's why, Jai comes to mind. He's been on our show. We talked about discipline, and
Jai's great.
I think even on the show, like he's like, I remember the first couple, people can be flaky in New York. Like, I am not a flaky person. I'm a person that will tell you like, hey, I can't make it. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be there. I think one of the best things you ever said on the show, John, was like, no is a sentence.
No is a complete sentence.
But, no is a complete sentence, right?
Yeah.
So, and sometimes it's just no. But I was starting to get, here we are, Jai and I, right? He's a yoga teacher. I'm a yoga teacher. He's been teaching for a long time. I've been teaching for a long time. We have we're two fucking solid dudes teaching at the same studio. I'm like, you got to check the guy out. I'm like, all right, who's this fucking Jai guy? Like, what's going on? You know what I mean? It's like, and I show up to class. He's a good guy. He's, teaches from his heart. And then, I just wanted to get to know him. Like, he's a good dude. I just kind of wanted to know him a little bit. And I sent him a message on Instagram. He was teaching down the street from me. And I was like, hey, I'll be there Friday at 12 o'clock for your class. He did not expect me to show up. He because people flake.
Sure.
And I showed up, and that was the start of our friendship. Right there.
There you go.
Right fucking there, because I said I was going to show up, and then also consistently from there, I keep showing up. I keep showing up. We actually dropped in. He moved out upstate. He opened a studio upstate, and myself and two other teacher friends of mine took off a Tuesday to go to his 6 o'clock first class of this new studio. It was like 2.5 hour drive. We rented a car, went up, and I showed up for my boy, and he was shocked. I'm getting a little goosebumps because it's just so great. He's like, what the fuck? What the fuck? And it was great to see him, and it was great to support him. But now I can really say I love the guy. I trust the guy. I would do anything for the guy, because we started off our relationship as friends, right, in a very strong, good place where we started respecting each other, just knowing each other, in the sense of I'm respecting my word. I'm showing up when I said I would, and that consistency. And here it's like I got a great friend the rest of my life.
There you go, man.
So,
there you go. And
sure.
let's flip that script, right? Let's say that if you had told Jai that you were going to show up
Right.
and you didn't.
Yep.
I mean, okay, maybe this is a bad example because right then you haven't even established trust with Jai.
Right.
Right. But in telling him something and then not showing up, that just further degrades the ability to establish trust.
Right.
But let's go with another example, and I want to use something.
Well, let me just say, John, in that moment right there, sorry, and we'll come back to your example. But like, if I didn't show up, right? I mean, then I diminish the opportunity to have a second chance to develop that trust, because now it's just like, he might feel a little hurt, or like not hurt necessarily because early, but like it's just like, this fucking guy said he's going to show up and he didn't show up. It's like, who is he? Then I'm a different person.
Right.
Instead of the person I want to be.
Right.
Or the person I want to show up in the world. But yeah, what's your other example?
Well, I was just going to say, I want to use an example that where trust has been established.
Yes.
And then you break it. And trust, it takes, like have already been talking about thus far, it takes time to develop that trust. You could build it for weeks, months, years even. But even when you've built it for so long, let's say in a marriage, right? You've built it for so long, and here I'm going to use a personal example. So I'm on my second marriage. On my previous marriage, and this seems trivial at first, but you'll understand it here in a second. My wife and I, we had built trust up for a while. And then I'm a big time Amazon junkie, and specifically I order a lot of books from Amazon, and these books pile up by my bedside. People are recommending books all the time. People are sending us books, and it's great. I love books, but you can only read so many, and books would pile up on my bedstand. And eventually, my ex, she said, "Hey, do me a favor. And don't order any book. She said, promise me you won't order any more books until you've read all the ones by our bed." And I said, I promise that I will not. And what did I do? Somebody recommended a book, and I ordered it. And it came in the mail, and she received it. And I come back. I was at the Naval Postgraduate School at the time. I was in Monterey. And I come back, and she's holding this book. And I'm like, what's up? And she's like, you ordered this book. You ordered this book after you promised me that you wouldn't. And I was like, yeah, what's the big deal? I mean, it's just a book. And she's like, it's not about the book. It's about the fact that you had promised me something, and then you went back on your word. And when you go back on your word, all it takes, trust is fragile, man. You build it up for years, and one stupid slip up, like that book, that now that trust is cracked. There's a crack in that trust that I've built up for a long time. And then she starts to question everything else that I've said. Hey, do you love me? Ooh. Are you going to stay steady or stay faithful to me? And it's just this one little thing that can break that trust. And it's hard to fix once someone feels betrayed. Even with this book thing, it took a while for her to be like, okay, now I trust you again. Because they're always going to have that doubt in the back of their mind, even if you do apologize.
Right.
So, that trust takes time to build, but you have to be very careful about not breaking it, because it's like a house of cards, right? A house of cards, it takes a long time to build, but man, I tell you, it is easy to knock down. And once it's knocked down, it is hard to rebuild. I think that's a piece that when trust gets broken, and what do we do to fix it? Because betrayal, I mean, even in that book story, it was a betrayal, right? I betrayed that trust, and betrayal sucks. And I'll turn it over to you here, Will. I'd love to hear your thoughts about, why do you think getting betrayed hurts so much more than just a regular mistake?
It can cut. Well, people, I'd imagine, in what you just situation that you just described, it's like it could, you wounded, they can take it very, very, very personal, right? It's it could be even, a bit of like a psychological trauma in some way. You've also like, you can in that betrayal, you can impact, maybe their self-esteem in some way. They thought one thing was going to happen, you're going some way, you're moving one direction, and then you don't. It can actually hurt, their self-worth in the sense of like, wow, I can't believe John got that book. It's like, and why did he do that to me? And it's like, and they might feel like, oh, wait, he doesn't respect me, or this whole nother story can go on.
Right.
You literally can create a story in their mind, right? That might not be completely true. I mean, you're innocently like, it's a book, plus it's a habit that you're doing this as well. Right. And they could be suffering a little from grief, from like that lack of self-respect, or who knows what's going on in their mind. But you open up a different doorway, instead of keeping like, kind of the fortress of trust, that you've established. Well, I heard when you were speaking earlier about, the book, I was thinking like Rome wasn't built in a day. Trust isn't built in a day. It's not, but it could be destroyed overnight.
Oh yeah.
Very, very quickly, because the one thing, so it's betrayal is it's probably one of the deepest cutting relational experience you could possibly have. When someone's betrayed your trust, like, I mean, someone's betrayed my trust in the past, like a few people, and I can't, I'll hang out with them, or if that person's in my family or something like that, like, but I won't trust them with certain things. There's no way. There's absolutely no way. I mean, especially if they've never even addressed the betrayal.
Right.
I'm like, I don't know. I can't. You broke trust. Like, you said you're going to do this. You gave me your word, and then you broke it. And I'm like, I was like, okay.
And
change the relationship.
I think betrayal is active, right? Let's come back to your example with Jai, the other yoga instructor. You told them that you were going to show up to the class, right?
Right.
Let's say that you just forgot about it. You honestly forgot about it, and didn't show up, or you thought it was one day and it was actually another day and you didn't show up. That's a mistake. That's a mistake, right?
Right.
But let's say you told Jai that you were going to show up. Now it's that day. It's almost that time, and you text him and you tell him, "Hey, man, I can't make it because of X, Y, or Z," and that X, Y, or Z is complete bullshit. You're making up an excuse. It's not even real.
Lying.
And then you see Jai, a day later, but he somehow found out that you had in fact had the time and you were able to make it, but you lied about it. So that's an active betrayal, and that's what I think is the big difference between the simple mistake and betrayal is it's active, and in that active betrayal, you're violating trust, and I think that causes, to the other person, it causes a lack of self-worth, or maybe a change in self-worth in their eyes, a change in self-esteem. So I think that piece is critical. Now, I know we're coming up on time here, and we wanted to talk about micromanagement versus trust and delegation, but I think in a way we've talked about a lot of that. In this trust piece, you have to trust yourself, you have to trust your people, and you have to develop trust in you from the others, right? And that could be from the people that you're delegating to. They certainly trust that you're not going to micromanage them, but then also from above, right? If people are going to delegate down to you, you have to be able to show that you're going to consistently do what they task you with. And if you're not able to, here's a key, coming back to trusting in yourself and setting and respecting boundaries. If they give you something and you're like, man, I am maxed out, you got to express that. You got to be vulnerable the other way and be like, hey, boss, I would do this if I could, but you've already put so much on my plate. I don't think I'm going to be able to meet the mark. I'm not going to be able to do this on time. I'm not going to be able to do this on budget. I'm not going to be able to do this
Right.
I'm not going to be able to do it well. And I think that piece is with delegation. You've got to express and build trust up, down, and sideways. And that's
Yeah.
going to enable you as a person to delegate and to get delegated to, right? So I
Right.
think that's really, if you wanted to bubble, or rather box up everything else that we had to say about delegation in just a couple of sentences, I think that's it. Did I miss anything there, Will?
I don't think I don't think you missed anything. What I would add is get to know your people
Oh yeah, for sure.
as people. You know what I mean? Instead of just as like, well, they do this job and that's their social security number. That's not. You know what I mean? You got to really see and be with people as people. And once and that's a great way to uh, just to get to know them. There's going to be some vulnerability that might come through, or you kind of like understand their life in a different way. So you might not be so judgmental in some way. So I just think really like we have to understand, John, regardless. I mean, especially in a business setting, is like people are people, and people have lives outside of work. People have problems that they're dealing with. People are trying to show up as their best selves. I'd imagine most people want to do, but sometimes they're not. And that can, we learned in the yoga room years ago. It's like, number one, meet people where they're at as far as when you teach them, right? But number two, it's like you don't know what the hell happened to someone's life when they came into the room. You have no idea if they just like were verbally assaulted in the subway and then they're coming to a yoga class, right? Or same thing at the office. Like you don't know if someone had a massive breakup or maybe a death in the family, and and here you are hovering over their shoulder, like, well, why didn't you get this done? Maybe ask them like, hey, like what's going on with you? Like,
right.
We talked about this happening, and just really being a person with another person instead of being like an authoritarian figure with a pawn, where you consider a pawn. Like, that's not gonna, that doesn't create good, a good dynamic. It doesn't create a relationship that you can see people as people, and when we see people as people, and you can understand, it's just like, well, he's just like me in some ways, because I have a life, he has a life, and we're trying to create, a life here together, in order to get this job done.
Right.
And that's one thing that I would add as far as delegation. And I would also say, John, if you're a micromanager, like I bet that you are in a state of crisis, a state of fight, flight, or freeze. You're panicked, right? And that's never going to work.
Scarcity
versus
mindset.
like being scarcity, right? Versus like being not necessarily abundant mindset when you're talking about delegation, but just if you're calm, and if you're hired the right fucking people, trust your people, right? And have them get it done. You have a goal, you have a deadline, and if they don't make that mark, that time or the second time or the third time, then maybe you should call them in and have a real adult conversation with them instead of just like being passive aggressive in some way.
Right. Yeah. Beautiful, brother. And I think, getting to know your people, that as a leader, that's clearly important on so many levels. Your emotional intelligence, it allows you to communicate better, allows you to delegate better, certainly, as we've been talking about on the show, but just getting to know your people.
Right.
I mean, and I don't mean, hey, getting to know all their children and all their birthdays and everything about every single person, because it's certainly not possible, especially as you scale your business or you scale whatever organization it is that you're leading. But maybe get to know 2 or 3 levels below yourself, your direct reports, those types of things. So anyway, great stuff here, Will. Thanks. Thanks for running through this. I would love to lead the closing practice and then wrap it up. But before I do that, for those who might miss the closing practice or tune out prior to the closing practice, thanks for joining us. We would love to hear from you. What do you think? And on Spotify, you can comment. You can comment on this show now. Hey, let us know what you feel trust is. Let us know what you feel when trust is betrayed. Let us know what you feel is foundational for leadership, or rather trust in yourself, right? We would love to hear from you. We'd love to hear from you in Spotify. We'd love to hear from you on YouTube. We'd love to hear from you on email. Reach out to us. And we appreciate you tuning into the show, whether it's in podcast form, whether it's in video form, wherever you might be tuning in, we appreciate it. And we ask that you do share it. Share it with your friends, your family, anyone that you feel could benefit from hearing this. So that all said, thanks again for joining us. I'll run into the closing practice and then we'll wrap it up in a bow.
Awesome.
So let's go ahead and get comfortable, whatever that might look like for you. And when I say comfortable, I want you to feel comfortable physically and psychologically. So if that includes closing your eyes, then I invite you to do so. And obviously, if that's available to you, if not, then just keep doing what you're doing. And let's just bring our attention to our breath. And we're not going to force it or change it in any way, shape, or fashion yet. We're just going to notice our breath, be quiet and still with our breath. Trust in your breath and in yourself right now, just to be here and sit still for a moment. Paying attention to the rise and fall of your chest and belly as you breathe in and as you breathe out. And trust in the environment. Again, if you're in a space that you feel physically and psychologically safe, what is it that allows you to trust in that environment around you? Just feel that trust. And then I am very thankful for the trust that you are putting in me and Will for listening to the show, but also in letting me guide you right now through this short practice. The trust that you are putting in me, I am thankful for that. And I want you to feel that trust. Feel that trust that you're putting in someone that you may not even really know. And in doing so, you're being vulnerable. And in being vulnerable, I trust in you. And I am thankful for that. We feel trust in ourselves. We feel trust in the environment we're in. You feel trust in us, and we feel trust in you. And now we'll conclude with 2 deep closing breaths together. Let's begin by exhaling. A nice deep breath in, filling up from the bottom all the way to the top, holding full at the top and letting it go. Nice and easy. Trust in your breath, trust in your body. Nice deep breath in, all the way in, filling all the way to the top. Hold and release. And as you release, start to bring some movement back into your body. And if your eyes were closed, go ahead and start to blink them open. And that is a wrap. Thank you all for trusting in me and Will, for being here with us today. And we love you all, and we appreciate you. Will, over to you, brother.
No, hey, thanks, John. Yeah, it's great. And great for everyone out there. Fantastic. Like, slow yourself down. And that's how, that's all. I mean, just everybody, calm down, just calm yourself down and work to calm yourself down. And all this stuff comes through. And then trust starts. Yeah, it's all there.
Trust
calm
starts
down,
there, man.
slow down. It does. And so that's it. Thanks, John. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Peace.
Okay. Peace.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you walk away with some new tools and insights to guide you on your life journey. New episodes are being published every week, so please join us again for some meaningful discussion. For more information, please check out mentalkingmindfulness.com.